The Papal Conclave to replace Pope Francis has begun in Rome. The highly selective process happens behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel. But what does this process involve, and who are the early favorites for the next pope? To discuss, we welcome Craig Considine, who is an author and scholar of Religion and Interfaith Dialogue at Rice University. Craig, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
You know, considering your area of expertise, this is your busy season. It doesn't happen often, huh?
This is very true. Last time in 2013, I was in Dublin, but I was in the middle of my PhD, so I had no time. And now being at Rice, it's been a pretty hectic 2 weeks, and I suspect it'll be a pretty hectic week ahead here.
So, Craig, why don't we start with what is happening right now? Bring us into the fold of things.
Well, did you watch the ceremony this morning? They took the oath. Each cardinal has just taken their oath. The doors of the Sistine Chapel have been shut and locked with a key. That's actually what conclaves means. It's a Latin term for with the key. So once those doors are shut, there's not a lot that we know outside of the fact that the voting starts. So very likely for there to be a vote this evening. And as I was mentioning on Fox 26 this morning, this voting system is old school. It's paper ballot. So each cardinal is sitting at a desk. They have their own spot at the desk, and they write the choice on the piece of paper. And then each cardinal goes and delivers this piece of paper to an urn. They say a prayer. They say that this is my choice, that my conviction is behind this choice. And then there's a small team that counts the votes. And if we see the white smoke, that means that we have a pope. Very unlikely for that to happen today, but you never know. But these things usually take 2 to 3 days. The last 4 have taken roughly 2 to 3, but the longest in history, I think, was in the 12th century, went for like 3 years. Oh. I don't think we're going to see that. Yeah. 3 years, if you can imagine that.
We say the word conclave now and everyone goes right to think about the movie. And the movie gives you, and we've talked about this on the show before, outside of the plot lines of that movie, the ceremony, the process, how accurate is what they depict in that film?
This is a good question. And I've been reading a lot of the cardinals who are pushing back at the kind of nasty politicking side of things. A lot of them say that that's not really accurate, that there's more collegiality amongst the cardinals. But the film also quite accurately represented the formal process that I just described with the voting system and having to go up to the urn and you say a prayer and then there's a small team there. So it's a Hollywood movie. A lot of it is reflective of reality, and then sometimes it's maybe over-dramatized to make a good storyline, to make it a little bit more dramatic.
My understanding, not nearly where yours is that the concept is God will put in the heart of each of these cardinals what to do, who to vote for. And so to see in the movie the politicking, I had never understood that happened. But I was always concerned with the idea that, well, if you feel that this is what's been put in your heart, you're going to keep writing the same name all the time. But there is a shift and the voting does change. What leads to the cardinals shifting position? Is it conversation? Is it meditation? Where does it come from, do you believe?
I'd say a combination of both, conversation and meditation. That's actually a nice way of putting it. So here's what's happening. There's going to be just one vote today, but tomorrow they'll have 2 votes in the morning. And if they don't have a winner, they break, and then they'll have 2 more in the afternoon. And during that break, you can imagine a lot of chatter is happening. And the film did show that. It did show those scenes. It almost looked like a big cafeteria and then kind of tables everywhere, and they're chit-chatting. So something like that is certainly happening. The politicking is inevitable, but I think the film kind of made it like there was a nasty politicking. And if I can say something here on a personal note, my dad asked me recently, he goes, "Did you watch the conclave?" I said, "Not yet." And he said, "Do you know who the bad cardinal is?" And I said, "I do not." And he said, it's Cardinal Tedesco, which is my mother's maiden name. So we had a pretty good laugh at that. He's like he's the arch villain, you know, like a good movie needs that.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that that's how it's going to be playing out here over the next couple of days. There's more collegiality than people think. You know, it's a religious experience too. You know, like they are being guided by what Catholics would refer to as the Holy Spirit and the goodness that comes with that. So, yeah, like with everything, it's a movie, and you take it with a little grain of salt.
The understanding that I have is that Pope Francis had put in place or replaced a number of cardinals. So this group possibly has not met like this before. A good number of them, more than I think it's 2/3, have not come together in this kind of way before and may not even know each other. With that kind of landscape, how do we pick who may be the front runners already? And do we have a sense for that out here?
Another great point. So with Francis, he put into place 82 of the 133 cardinals that are eligible to vote, which is very substantial. And he also brought in cardinals from the periphery of the church. So the countries that have not previously had cardinals. So even like Sweden has never had one, Haiti, Mongolia. And they've been in Rome for the last couple of days, chit-chatting with some of the more established figures within the Vatican, kind of like your celebrity cardinals, really, and those that have been deemed, at least by the media, as palpable. So right now, I'd say there's like 20 names that are being floated out there. I've been reading tons of different stories, and one thing keeps coming up by people who probably are experts in their own right. It's these things are notoriously difficult to predict. And even with Francis in 2013, like he was not one of these 20 type names that I just mentioned, the palpable candidates. So could it be someone who the media is not talking about? Sure. Could it be someone that the media talks about? Also, sure. You know, so we shall see.
Craig, can a cardinal vote for themselves?
Another very good question. Yes, actually, they can. But it's obviously frowned upon.
Okay.
You know, Catholics are big into sin. Perhaps the word sin comes into play there. But also, there's no way of knowing if a cardinal does vote for himself, because once those paper ballots are put in the urn and mixed up, eventually that team right by the urn does announce each ballot, but those ballots cannot be tied to specific cardinals. So yes, they can. But and does it happen? I bet. You know, I bet even in those moments, the ego will never disappear, will it? Even in a holy space like, you know, St. Peter's. But yes, they can.
I come out of the Orthodox Church, and whenever they make any vote, it has to be unanimous, but we're only dealing with 7 people voting. In something like this, what's the threshold to be then the Pope?
It's 2/3. So there's 133 electors at the moment. I can't do math in my head at the moment, but 2/3 of that 133. Okay. So that's it. It could be more than that majority, but that's what you need. You need 2/3, and only popes under the age of, only cardinals under the age of 80 are allowed to vote. So there are some votes, like there's the only cardinal in Ireland, for example, cannot participate in this because past the age of 80.
When you talk about that 2/3 rule and you look at the number of cardinals that Francis put in, should we assume that whoever gets chosen may very well be continuing the philosophies and beliefs of Francis as opposed to a massive right turn here?
Another very good question. And so here's what I've been thinking with Francis's nominees, those that he put into the College of Cardinal. A lot of them are from the periphery, but a lot of these countries in the global south and elsewhere may not be as open to some of the progressive pushes that Francis had made, especially on LGBTQ and same-sex issues. So here it's very interesting. This conclave is arguably the most diverse that the church has ever had. But that doesn't necessarily mean that some of these cardinals from Africa and the periphery of the church are going to get on board with some of these progressive elements. So it's going to be very interesting. We also don't know with Pope Francis, we don't know why he chose each of these cardinals. He may have chose them because they were strong on migrant rights, but they could also be more conservative when it comes to some of these social issues. So we shall see.
I guess I think it's hard for us in today's day and age to watch something like this progress because we want to know after each vote who's in the lead, who's doing this, who's doing that. And like you said, they are sealed in. How do we get leaks from inside? And do you expect we will see some?
I'm not sure how we get leaks inside because, in addition to them having this oath of secrecy, the Vatican also disrupts airwaves around St. Peter's. So there's not going to be a signal.
Wow.
It's very, very unlikely and rare for information to get out. And this is part of the reason why everyone's so fascinated with the conclave, because they're so unpredictable in many different ways. And not a lot of intelligence, if we can call it that, or data is going to be leaked. Now, obviously, once we see the white smoke and we have a pope, then the media gets access back, and then we can start exploring perhaps why certain cardinals voted this way or that way. But we're not there yet.
Yeah. You're listening to Hello Houston, and we're talking with Craig Considine of Rice University. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870.
To go back to this news blackout that we're going to be getting over the next few days while this goes on, what are you thinking about during that time? Is when we talk about like a trial by jury and the amount of time the jury's out, we start to formulate what we think they're doing. Any kind of that handicapping going on for you?
Yes, for sure. And I've been breaking this down, at least in my own mind, into three realms. We have a continuation of Pope Francis. I think if we get a vote today, unlikely, or even tomorrow, my guess is that it will be one of these more progressive cardinals. If it goes deep, if it goes like beyond 4 to 5 days, I think it could be a radical shift, which is someone like Cardinal Sarah from Guinea in Africa, who is very conservative with his orthodoxy and really has pushed back against Pope Francis. I think if it goes the normal, 2, 3, I think we might see someone who is more centrist, more moderate, someone who is acting more like a caretaker, and someone who may not be pushing anything drastic or dramatic. Like I read an article this morning, the Boston Globe, it said that prior to today's conclave, a lot of the cardinals were looking for someone to just steady the ship and to stay out of the limelight and focus on the church per se, rather than following what Pope Francis did, which was really made himself available to every conflict really in the world. So these are potential scenarios. And as I've been saying, we are patient. We'll see. We are patiently waiting. I know for me, real quick, I'm preparing for all three of these types of candidates.
Right.
How is it going to impact the world? How will it impact American society? How will it impact the church? So I've got a lot of homework to do, even though they're behind closed doors and we have really no idea what's going on.
I would assume, though, we know who the cardinals are. A lot of them publish, write, speak. So you can maybe have gauging ideas of where they sit. When you look at that grouping, are there certain themes that you see repeating over and over again that may be carried into the conclave?
I think the two big issues for the College of Cardinals is the sex abuse scandal, which a lot of cardinals are still quite upset about. They feel like, from what I've been reading, Francis kind of just glossed over it. Like he dealt with it at the beginning of his pontificate and then held a bunch of meetings and conferences in the Vatican and then kind of moved on to other things. So this is something that across this spectrum that I laid out is going to be there. And then I think also, as I mentioned earlier, the same-sex LGBTQ stuff is something that is going to be discussed in depth for sure. So those are the things that I think they all care about. And then when we get to certain factions, they're going to have their own nuances and their own particular areas where they want to focus on. But I think those are the two biggest things, but there's certainly other stuff too.
And we do have a question from YouTube. Najim would like to know, what if there is a tie?
I don't think there can be
Well,
a
it's
tie.
1/3.
You need 2/3.
Yeah, two-thirds. Okay, got it. Sorry, y'all both looked at me. I was like, I'm asking for Najim.
Yeah, there has to be 2/3.
Okay.
Once you hit the 2/3 threshold, then that is the Pope.
Got it.
Right.
Okay. Following along here.
Yeah, okay. We also have a caller on the line. Sada is with us from the 3rd Ward. What is your thoughts?
I just wanted to say, I wanted to remind everybody, I know we're talking about the politics of this moment, but there's a sacredness, and the fact that they have to distort signals, because we should all have reverence for people's ancient processes of choosing their spiritual leader. And I know we're talking politics, and I'm not even Catholic, right? But I have Catholics in my family. I've worked at Catholic institutions, and this is a very sacred moment. And I don't want to, make it like, Twitter and TikTok, who got a leak. And I think we should have some reverence. So much is no longer sacred in our society. We have such little reverence for processes and moments of spirituality and faith that I just want to remind us, we're talking about, particularly people who are not Catholic, right, one of the most important moments in their lives. And let's keep a sense of reverence for people's faith in their spiritual walk. But
Asada,
but let's not make it all about the politics.
Yes, Asada, thank you very much for that. And I think that's a really strong point that I think we need to remember. As much as we talk about it and, in a sense, handicap the race, it's because we're looking at somebody who will be a leader of millions of people across the globe. And so it is a significant shift depending on who becomes their spiritual leader. But to go back to your point, and that brings up my point about how they go about choosing, it's supposed to be inspired by God. This is a sacred episode in the life of the church in which folks are to meditate and feel moved by the Spirit of God. It's something you can't really validate in a checklist of how it works and such. But I appreciate that comment and that thought on it. Craig, any thoughts that you have on that?
I would say amen to our previous caller.
Yeah,
I thought that was beautifully said. And let me say, too, when I got to my office this morning, I turned on Vatican news on YouTube, and I watched everything up until the oath and even the oath. And it was beautiful. They had music. It was in the Sistine Chapel, the order, the power. I mean, it's all there. And that can't be forgotten in this, as our caller said. Politics is certainly important, but this is a sacred moment, and these are sacred traditions that a ton of people hold extremely, extremely dear. I mean, even this morning when I was watching it, I was moved.
Yeah,
just moved by the formality of it and the power of it.
Craig, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. And I'm sure we will want you back on once the white smoke comes up so we can have a better understanding of who is going to be leading all of the Catholics across the globe. It'll be fascinating to see how this evolves.
That's a date. I'll take you up on that. That sounds good.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.